Huh? Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that, Ron.
Welcome everyone, bienvenidos todos. My name is Alberto Díaz-Calleros. I'm the director of the Center for Latin American Studies here at Stanford University. We have today our Friday lecture will be with Professor Enzo Sauma, our Stanford Luxich visiting scholar. And I thank you, all of you who are joining us in this, also the YouTube live stream. Since this is a webinar that is being live streamed, we also have our speaker here in our seminar room here at Stanford. You will be able to access this in our YouTube page, in the class YouTube page. You will be able to have this live stream available and rewatch it once it ends, and there will be also closed captioning options available there. Kindly submit any questions you might have in the chat, in the comments of via the YouTube chat. And I will make sure that those reach Professor Sauma during the Q&A session today. I want to remind all of us that we are here at Stanford in the land and the territory of the Ohlone original peoples. We offer gratitude to the land, to the water, and the air that surrounds us, and pay our respects to the past, the present, and the future of the Ohlone and the Lenape peoples, who continue to be present in their homelands, land that they never willingly ceded, and throughout their diasporas. Before we begin, I also want to say something important. I'm very grateful to the Luxich family that we are now. This is the first time we have a Luxich visiting scholar here at Stanford. This is a new program we have started. We wanted to start it just before the pandemic. It got delayed. But this program allows for visiting scholars and fellows to come, Chilean academics and professionals, and spend some time here at Stanford, a quarter or even a shorter stay, in which they're able to work with faculty and with students here at Stanford, share their research, share their projects. So this is, really a pleasure to be able to finally get started with our Luxich program. Enzo Sauma is professor at the School of Engineering and director of the Católica Energy Research Center in the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile. He earned both his PhD and his master's in industrial engineering and operations research at the University of California, Berkeley. We don't hold that against you. And he also holds degrees, both a BSc and a Bachelor in Science and a Master in Science on Industrial Engineering from PUC, from the Universidad Católica in Chile. His interests include power system economics, environmental economics, mathematical programming, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and energy policy. But today he will talk about broader themes. The title of the talk is The Value of Flexibility in Long-Term Energy Planning Decisions. And so thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Alberto, for the presentation. It's really a pleasure to be here and to make this presentation. And I'm going to try to talk about some ideas of what, in general, I'm trying to do. Here I'm doing research with my host from Wallach, who is here. So what I'm going to talk today is what is the value of introducing flexibility in the decisions that we are going to do or we want to plan in the future. So the outline is that we're going to start with a brief motivation, then we are going to introduce this concept of flexibility and explain a little bit how we use a methodology to value that flexibility, and then show some examples, and at the end I'm going to conclude some takeaway for the presentation. So the first thing is that probably you are all aware that climate change is probably the largest problem that we have here. and we need to face it. We need to try to come with a way to solve it. And everyone's, I think, know that. And politicians are aware of that, they are worried of that, and they want to act. And the political process demand act now. They want to make decisions that we cannot wait more because the emission, if we wait, that implies that we have emissions and we have effects that we are not going to avoid later. So we really need to act now. And the world is acting now. Probably not at the pace we want, but it's acting now. If you see this graph, for example, is in the last 5 years until 2020, how the capacity have been growing, the installed capacity has been growing in the electricity sector from renewables. The yellow bar is the capacity that is installed at the world level in solar photovoltaics, the solar panels that you can see sometimes in the roof of the houses or in other places. And if you see have been growing rapidly, even in 2020, solar photovoltaics became the fourth largest source of electricity in the world, which is a tremendous goal that we got. Of course, still most of the electricity comes from fossil fuels, so that's still is a way to go there. So that's say we are acting, but the political process requires to act even more rapidly. But it's not that easy. And one of the reasons it's not that easy is because most of the renewable sources are in the places people don't want to live. Most of the people, I don't know why, but they don't want to live in places where it's extremely hot or extremely windy. So as you can see there, in the middle of the United States, there's a very good windy places, and in Arizona, for example, very good solar resources, but not many people want to live in those places. And many people want to live in places where those renewable resources are not available. So one solution for that is, well, let's develop a lot of renewable energy and bring that energy to the people. So we need to build a lot of power lines to bring that energy to the people. But not everyone agree with that solution. Not everyone say, I'm not sure that the best solution is to build all lines for all the places and bring the renewable energy. Maybe there's other solutions. Well, one solution is have underground lines, but this is very costly. So cost also play an important role in the equation. But there may be other solutions. Other solutions could be storage. Why not, for example, instead of building so many lines, build less lines, but having a storage for the energy, so we can store energy, for example, from the solar panels during the day and use that energy that is stored during the night. So, for example, these pictures, I don't know if this, this is it. Okay, this picture here are what is called the pumped storage, which means that, for example, during the day you can use solar power to pump water from the sea to these reservoirs here, and then when there's no sun, you can produce electricity with, like any hydropower plant, using this water. So it's kind of storing electricity in the form of water. Unfortunately, those conditions here or here is not so frequent. worldwide. So it's not that you can put this kind of pumped storage in every place. But the other possibilities are batteries, for example, making containers or within a car. If you have many cars, many electric cars, and you can use those batteries, for example, to store energy, solar energy from the day and using during the night. That could be possible. Still very expensive, but it's a possibility. So then, with all this in mind, came with the key part of what is my message today, is that all these decisions are subject to uncertainty because we don't know how the future is going to look like. So there is uncertainty. Let's focus on this graph. There's uncertainty on prices. Storing energy in batteries today is very expensive, but we don't know when it's going to be competitive, if it's going to be cheaper, how much cheaper, and when it's going to be competitive. This graph shows, for example, the projection that Bloomberg do about batteries, and it says here that by 2030, probably storing energy in battery is going to be cheaper than having power lines or using fossil fuels for ancillary services, which is the word that we use in power system for having reserve. So if that happens, well, really, one possibility is wait until 2030 and buy or invest a lot in batteries and solve the problem. But one of the problems is that this is just a projection. We don't know really if 2030 is going to be the year, and we don't even know if that is going to be the price on that year. There's also uncertainty in the resources. Wind, we can make predictions in average of what is going to be the wind, but we don't know exactly how much wind is going to be tomorrow or during the day or during the next month. And the same happens with solar. We can make average predictions, but we don't know exactly. And one of the very important uncertainties also is related with technology. We don't know what is going to be the technology tomorrow. And I put here an example that is part of what I'm trying to do research right now. It's about green hydrogen. Hydrogen is being used especially in heavy-duty trucks because heavy trucks is not very efficient to have it electric because they need a lot of batteries, and batteries are heavy in terms of weight. So hydrogen doesn't weigh too much, so it's a good solution. But today, most of the trucks that are used in the US or in Europe, the hydrogen trucks, they use hydrogen that is produced based on fossil fuel, from gasified coal or natural gas. So that's what we call the gray hydrogen, because it's hydrogen, it's more efficient, but have emissions. And in the future, it could be possible to produce hydrogen, what is called electrolysis, which is from the molecule of water, we can split the hydrogen and the oxygen and keep the hydrogen, which has a lot of energy, to use in these trucks or even to reverse the process to produce electricity. And the way it works, this electrolysis, is that you inject a lot of electricity into this device that is called electrolyzer. You inject a lot of electricity to split the hydrogen and the oxygen. If that electricity comes from renewable energy, then you can produce what is called the green hydrogen. So we are not having emissions for producing the hydrogen, and of course when the hydrogen is used, we don't have emissions at the point. So we avoid a lot of emissions. So that's the idea. Still, it's very expensive. The current technology is alkaline cells, which basically is a membrane that is not very efficient today. But in the future, at least in the laboratory, they are trying, for example, other technologies like proton membrane, which is PEM cell, which is much more efficient in the production of hydrogen. But that is very expensive. It's even more expensive than just to give an idea, producing gray hydrogen in Saudi Arabia costs $2 per kilogram of hydrogen. This electrolysis with alkaline cells costs $4 per kilogram of hydrogen. And if you use this PEM technology, it's more than 6. So it's of course 2 or 3 times the other cost. So the thing is that, as I mentioned at the beginning, we need to act now to the challenge of the climate change. But if you act now and you make investment that is irreversible, then maybe it's not the best decision. So this is a very simple example to show that. And let's use the hydrogen as an example. So suppose that today we have the possibility to invest in a hydrogen production plant, of course with the technologies available today, which is alkaline cells. It's very costly, but we can start to produce hydrogen and avoid a lot of emissions. So let's suppose that the cost is $3.5 million if we invest today. And alkaline cells are not very efficient, so we got some emissions that we avoid from right now, but it's a small or moderate reduction. So the benefit, let's say, is $3 million. So if we invest today in that technology, we get the benefit of the $3 million and we pay the cost of $3.5 million, so we get a net, say, benefit of minus $0.5 million. But maybe you could say, well, it's worth paying $500,000 if we are going to save a lot of emissions and you're going to improve the health of the people. So maybe it's a good idea. The point is that, well, let's compare with other possibilities. So if we wait until, let's say, 2030, that is better or is worse? And let's suppose that we have 2 possible scenarios in the future, to make it simple. Scenario A is that we don't improve too much, so basically we still have the same technology, the alkaline cells, so cost is reduced a little bit, but not that much. So let's say that the cost for investing in 2030 is going to be $3.2 million. And reductions of emissions is going to be the same because technology doesn't improve that much. But we lose 8 years of emission reduction because we wait until 2030. So the benefit, instead of being 3 million, is going to be 1 million. If this future happens, the politician that advised to invest today is going to say, you see, I make the right decisions. I did this investment, and you see that if we didn't make that investment, we lose 8 years of reduction emissions, and thanks that I make the decision, we have those reduced emissions. But there's another possibility in the future. Let's say that with the same probability, it could happen in scenario B, with the technology improves. We have this new technology that became cheaper and became much more efficient, so you can produce a lot more hydrogen and you can have a lot more emission reductions. So those emission reductions more than recover the time you lost, so let's say the benefit is $5 million. and the cost is $2 million in this scenario. And I personally think that if the politician get to this scenario, it's going to say, well, you know, 8 years ago, I didn't know that this is going to happen, so I make the right decision at that time. But let's think today, if it's a good decision with these two scenarios, and suppose that they are equally likely, wait 8 years. So you can compute the expected net benefit today of waiting until 2030. And if you wait, you could have this scenario in which you get the benefit of 1 and a cost of 3.2, which is this one, and we multiply it by 0.5 probability of having this scenario. And then you have this other scenario also with 0.5 probability of having a benefit of 5 and a cost of 2. And that gives you expected net benefit of 0.4 positive. So, in this example with these numbers, actually the politician was not right. I mean, with this number, it's better wait until 2030, because the reason is when you make the investment today, it's good that you are going to avoid emission, but it's bad that by making some investment today, you are lack with the technology that is not probably the most efficient. So you need to be careful that decisions today also close some doors. Because, well, of course, in 2030, if you invest here, you could put everything in the garbage and invest again. But it's putting more money into the trash, so it doesn't make sense. So what is shown here is just an example that it's not always the best decision to invest as much as possible today. But if we want to go even further, the decision doesn't need to be just act today or wait. Because we know we want to act today. So what if we think in act today, but in a flexible way? What does that mean? Let's say, okay, we want to have the investment today. We want to build the hydrogen plant today. But in a way that if a scenario B happened, we could modify the technology so we don't lose the investment. Of course, that is not for free. So let's consider this scenario with flexibility in which we can invest today, but in an electrolyzer that is more costly. Instead of costing $3.5 million, costs $5 million, because it's an electrolyzer in which you have exchangeable membranes. So you can exchange the alkaline membranes and put the proton membrane, which is more costly, but have the possibility that you can change the membrane. If you invest more costly here, then you still have two scenarios. Well, scenario A is that technology doesn't improve, so you still are going to have the same technology, but the good thing is that you didn't lose the 8 years because you invest today. Well, more costly than before, but you invest today. So the benefit is the same $3 million that investing today. The costs are a little higher. But you have the scenario B that since you already invest in this exchangeable membrane electrolyzer, now if this happens with the best technology, you only need to incur in a small extra cost, which is the change of the membrane. You don't need to invest in the whole electrolyzer again. So this, let's say, is $500,000, the extra cost. And then we have a lot of benefit because we reduce emission from the very beginning, and then when we change the membranes, we reduce even further. So let's say the benefit is $7 million. And if we compute the net benefit with the flexibility, actually is $0.75 million, which is even larger than waiting until 2030. So that's the main message, is that the decision doesn't need to be just always invest as much as possible today or wait. It could be invest today, but with flexibility, which is going to cost you more today, but maybe it's the best decision for having that flexibility for the future. That's like the message. How we do this with the math? Well, we in general use a tool that is called real options. Real option in general is very used and started in financial options, in the financial market, but is useful also in other fields. And real options in general gives the right but not obligation of doing certain actions, such as the option of expand or leave the project or wait or grow the capacity of something in the case that is convenient for you. So within real options, there are different methods of how you value that flexibility, and I'm not going to go into the details, but some of them are binary trees, least square Monte Carlo, or compound least square Monte Carlo. In some of the paper that I wrote, you are going to see those kind of methodologies, so that's why I mentioned here. The examples I'm going to show here are using least square Monte Carlo and compound least square Monte Carlo. So in a nutshell, what that means is that you identify what are the key variables. For example, if you are going to build a hydrogen plant, the key variable is the cost of electricity. So that key, for example, or the demand for hydrogen, that key variable, you project many scenarios in the future. So you run, for example, 50,000 trajectories, possible trajectories, and for each trajectory, you are going to evaluate how it's going to behave, how it's going to be the best decision, and how it's going to behave the model. And then you can see what are all the possibilities for all the uncertainties. And you can take average, you can see the behavior of those variables. And using those trajectories, as I mentioned, I can compute the present value of the project with flexibility and without flexibility. So then, comparing those, I can compute the value of the flexibility. So let's show very quickly some examples. This is Chile. It's a very long country. We use this technology of real option to evaluate the transmission line that connect the two systems, the north system and the central system. They are now interconnected. They were interconnected in 2018, but this project was performed at that year. So it was just in the time that we were evaluating the connection. And the question here is, should we build the line for just the capacity we need today, or we need to put like an extra possibility of expanding tomorrow? That was the problem. So the first step is, okay, let's define the base case. The base case is build a line with the capacity we need today. So that's the line is going to be built, and this is what we call the rigid project, which is investing today in the capacity we need. And we compare that with the flexible project. What is the flexible project? Is, let's say, okay, we have some towers that cost a little more, because you see that it's not only having the cables with the capacity you need today, but also the possibility to put more cables in the future. So you can have extra capacity, but you are not putting those cables today. It's just preparing the tower for the possibility to expanding tomorrow. Of course, that is more investment today, but have the flexibility for tomorrow. Then I'm not going to go into details. This is the extra cost. So, but Yeah, sorry, this is the extra cost. So the extra cost of having these flexible towers, let's say, compared with the regular towers is $4.6 million. So that is the one you need to convince the investor that they are going to invest $4.6 million more just to have the possibility to put this extra capacity later. If you put the extra capacity, then you need to pay $22.59 million extra for the cable. But this is just in the case that is convenient. If you don't do it, you don't incur that cost. Okay, so let me, and we apply this idea of the least square Monte Carlo, in which we identify the key variables like the price of electricity, and we randomize, we run 50,000 trajectories, and we compute the optimal decisions in each of these cases. And then when we have the average of all these decisions, then we can see here that the flexible project, which means invest $4.6 million more today, at the end produce a net benefit of expected net benefit, of course, because you have possible trajectories, the $18 million. So there is a value of expending more money today in being flexible and having a flexible investment. That's the main idea there. And if you from these $18 million you subtract the $4.6 million you extra invest in the beginning, but still you are getting more value for the project. That's like the main idea. Let's see another example. Also applying a real option. Let's see the possibility that the community want to install rooftop solar with storage. And now, this example we want a little more complex because we have the possibility of having the solar panels, but also storage. And they are two different decisions. So let's model that, assuming that today we don't have anything. We don't have solar panels, we don't have the storage, batteries. But we have all these possible states in the future. So we can invest, let's say, two different levels of capacity for solar power, PMIN and PMAX. And you can also add batteries. You can you have all the combinations. Yeah? You could have PMIN solar power and PMIN's capacity of storage, and so on. So the idea is to evaluate if we need to decide today how much invest in solar and batteries, and we define that as a rigid project, how much cost you have compared with the flexible decision. So you have the flexibility to invest any time, and you have the flexibility not only of investing any time, but also invest in the capacity you want, and you can invest in multiple steps. I mean, you could invest first in solar, and then when the battery becomes cheaper, you invest in batteries. That's the idea. So there's many paths. Actually, there are 23 paths in this simple example, which is the ways the path of investment. So you can invest just in solar and capacity PMIN. You can invest just in solar, capacity PMAX. You can invest in solar, but PMIN, but then expand also in solar. Or you could invest in solar and then in batteries, and you have all the possibilities. So the idea is to see with these trajectories of what is going to happen with the price of electricity, what is going to happen with the price of solar panel, what is going to happen with the price of batteries, evaluate which is the most convenient one for, let's say, 20,000 trajectories, which is the one that we use here. So we, and I'm just graphing here in the graphs. There's only 20 trajectories because if I put the 20,000, you're not going to see it. So this is 20 trajectories, but we use 20,000 for the evolution of the electricity price, for the evolution of the cost of the PV solar panels, and for the cost of the batteries. And with that, we can see for each of the trajectories which is the optimal decision and which is the optimal path. And this shows that, for example, 70% of the time is economic to invest in the maximum capacity of solar. But from this, and almost the rest is almost always go directly to invest in solar and battery. But you see that 75% of the time is economic to invest in solar, but then most of the time it's economic to invest in solar and battery. So this flexibility allows you to make like what we call a compound decision. Invest first in solar and then in batteries. And that is the most convenient path. And then you can make comparisons. These are the most common states at the end. So this is the value in terms of money, the value of making the investment today, the rigid investment. So let's say, for example, well, the most common path that I mentioned before was this. Was Pmax Bmin, which is that. So if we invest today on this path, we are going to have a positive benefit, which is 4,000. I don't remember if this is. I think that it's $4.1 million. That's going to be the benefit. But if you have the flexibility of, and we call the single flexibility, just to invest whenever you want, but just at once. So you invest the solar panels and the batteries whenever you want, but just in 1 year, then you have a higher net present value than this. But even if you have the compound flexibility, which means that you have the flexibility of investing whenever you want and in multiple steps, you have even a larger value. So, and these are the difference, so you can measure the value of the flexibility. You can see also that, for example, if you just invest in solar, having the compound flexibility doesn't add value than the single flexibility. Why? Because solar is cheap today. So allowing to have multiple multiple year investment, if you just are going to invest in your rooftop solar, doesn't make sense, doesn't add value because it's already cheap to put. But if you want to put batteries, which is not that cheap today, add value to have the compound flexibility. So the message here with this second sample is there's value in the flexibility, but also you could have different type of flexibility. You could have flexibility for delay or flexibility for capacity, and you can combine it. And very quickly, to have time for questions, the last example is the one with the hydrogen. We apply real options also to the decision of investing in green hydrogen. I'll explain how the green hydrogen is produced. So we consider an investor that can invest in solar panels, also with two different capacities, in electrolyzers, also with two different capacities, and they can directly invest in both as well. So similar result than before. And we project the evolution of certain key variables like the price of electricity, the price of hydrogen, the cost of solar panels, the cost of electrolyzers. Similar to the other case, we have some possible states. We assume we don't have an investment at the beginning. and we can invest in 2 levels of solar panels and 2 levels of electrolyzer. In this case, it's a little more complex because you could have electrolyzers without having solar panels. The only problem is that you're going to use the electricity from the grid, which make emissions. So you are not going to produce green emissions, green hydrogen. You are going to produce gray hydrogen with emissions, and that have a cost for the environment. And we need to take, we did take into consideration those costs of emissions in this program. And then you can make all the combinations. We also have all the possible paths. And doing that, this is the result. The result says that in this case, I don't remember, but I think that we use also 20,000 different trajectories, scenarios. You see that most of the cases, 98% of the cases, is convenient to invest in solar power today, now, so and very, very quickly. But it's not convenient to invest directly in electrolyzer today because it's very expensive now, and there is a possibility, as I mentioned before, that the technology improves and it's more efficient. So the most efficient path is investing today in solar, waiting some years, and then investing in electrolyzer either with Emax capacity or Emin capacity. So those are in general the results. This is a similar table as before. We compare the rigid project, the single flexibility project, or the compound flexibility. In this case, for example, if you invest in solar, you see that there is not value of adding the flexibility. So it's not value of adding the flexibility if you are just going to put solar panels because they are already cheap. So there's not many uncertainty. You are going to save money if you put solar panels. So that's not worth to put flexibility there. But if you put flexibility in the decisions of investing in electrolyzers or in both solar and electrolyzer, you have a lot of value. And this is the value of the flexibility of being able to wait until there are the conditions for making investment. And let's, for example, see this one. Here, you have, this one. If you put solar panels, PEMIN solar panel, and maximum capacity of electrolyzer, you have a benefit of $18 million with the flexible scheme. But if you obligate the investor to make this investment today, you have a net present value of minus $8.7 million. So it's so expensive investing today that you are losing a lot of money. But just having the flexibility, and the flexibility is costly, as I mentioned. So you need a land and the device that are prepared for investing in the electrolyzer later. So you invest more money, but then more than pay because it's going to be cheaper in the future. So you make a lot of benefit by having this flexibility. Of course, you can have some sensitivity analysis, which is important because you don't know exactly what is going to be the cost in the future. So you see, well, what happened if the price of the hydrogen changed? What happened if the price of electricity changed? Even more than the trajectories you model, then you can do some certain analysis. And what you can see here, what is an important message as well, and is also a message from this, is that the more uncertainty you have in the future, the more valuable is the flexibility. So you really want to have flexible decisions when you don't know what's going to happen in the future. For example, with hydrogen. We have no idea what is going to be the best technology in 2030 for producing hydrogen. For producing solar power, well, there's not that much uncertainty. It's a mature technology. So probably you don't need that flexibility there. So to finish, the takeaway is first, adding flexibility to the energy planning decision process may be valuable, of course, depending on the parameters, but there is a possibility that you have a value on being flexible today. So maybe it's not the best decision to put as much as money in rigid investment today, because you are lack with certain technology. Also, some economic tools, such as real option, can help us in evaluating this flexibility and having the value of different possibilities of flexibilities. And the value of the flexibility, as I mentioned, increase as more uncertainty is handled. So that's important to take into account. Not always is worth to have the flexibility, but sometimes definitely is worth to have the flexibility. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so we have time for a couple of questions, I think. I'm also monitoring the chat in case there's some questions in the chat. Okay, so yes, go ahead. Maybe introduce yourself so that then someone else will.
My name is Isabella. Thank you for the great presentation. And I think my question, my background is in political science, so I'm thinking more of like implementation. Oops, I'm so sorry. And one thing that I was wondering is, for example, how do you convince politicians or like people to make those investments? Because one big problem, for example, when you try to make some interventions, especially in the developing world, is usually, you know that in rural areas, for example, you need some sort of insurance against threats like from droughts or like too much rain. But then you can't really convince people or the government to invest in those insurances because it is more costly now. And when you don't have like this flexibility in your budget, then it's hard. It's hard to convince people that this is the best option for the future. And so I don't know if this is part of your research, but I'll be really interested in really saying like, how do you convince politicians to make investment now that might not, for example, lead to electoral gains because you'll be spending more, and think about like long-term decisions.
Yeah, excellent question, Isabella. Thank you. I think that it's very important the implementation of this, and the way I think of this is that by making a decision of investment today and put the rules for the implementation, you are taking some cost. And what is important for the implementation is that decision makers can see that cost. For example, the system, how you build the transmission lines in the US and in Chile is the same, is that a network planner, a very wise institution, plan where is the right place to put those lines and the capacity that you need to put. And the next step, because the law say that, is that they run an action for somebody that is going to build that capacity and in that place. And that's it, and the line is going to be there for 30 years. You need to convince politicians that by doing that, they are not only allowing to transport that capacity of electricity, but they are also taking the cost of getting luck with that capacity for the next 30 years. So that's the way. When you, of course, make an investment today have a benefit. But the important thing is not question that is a benefit on that investment. Is that you will have more benefit if you have the flexibility, because by making that investment, you limit the capacity. And this is dynamic. I mean, if you build that capacity, what is going to happen is the industry that want to install there, they are thinking, well, there's not enough capacity, I'm going to be installed in other place. So it's not that everything is going to run and then I'll adapt. It's that by putting this flexible line, you could motivate, because people know that you can expand the capacity, so motivate some industry to come to the state, to install there, because I know that it's going to be that capacity. You need to convince people that mind switch, that is not the way they are thinking, because they are thinking, we have this problem, we can solve it this way, which is correct, it's right. But if you solve it with some flexibility looking in the future, you could make even better decisions sometimes. So I think that these kind of examples, the one that I would try to use to convince them.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hi, Eliza Moreno. Thank you so much for this. I couldn't help but think about the role that environmental governance and management systems play into this. So I appreciated your sensitive analysis, because when I think about solar panel installation in Los Angeles, I know part of it's prorated or discounted by the city as an initiative to build solar panels. And so I wanted to ask, did you incorporate the role in which government or even community-based management systems or governances play a role in the cost and fiscal flexibility when thinking through solar panel installation or even other forms of energy solutions?
Yeah. Well, I didn't include in these examples, but it's an important point. I mean, this example can show that there's benefit of being flexible. A different question, and a very important question, is who get these benefits. I mean, because it's a distribution issue of the benefits as well. So those benefits, actually, these benefits here are going to the population because they have better health, or it's just for the producer of energy that they get the benefit. That we don't consider that in these examples that I show here, but definitely it's an important issue. There is tools, economic tools to see that. So, for example, I did with some colleagues in the Edinburgh University, I did a study of how compete community energy against power plants, and how you distribute the benefit in one case or the other case, and how is different the distribution of the wealth when you have more community energy or you have more big power plants. We didn't incorporate it here because there are some complexities here, there are some complexity in the other model. If you put all together, sometimes it's too difficult, but definitely it's a challenge that is important to take into consideration.
Can I ask my question?
Sure.
Yeah. So I have kind of the opposite question of Isabella, because Isabella was thinking about, I think, the short-sighted politicians who just don't want to spend a lot of money and they don't see the electoral benefit. But I'm thinking the opposite, the white elephants, like politicians that love to say, we are going to put, whatever, the cells, the alkaline cells, and we're going to spend millions today. How do you prevent them? Because that's the other side of your analysis. How do you prevent them from doing the really expensive thing because they're pandering to people's sense of urgency that they want to have something done, no?
Yeah, that's right. Well, because you are right. I mean, in the sense that one other solution that I didn't put here is, okay, let's put all the PEM cells, invest today. Well, instead of 3.5 is $7 million today. Who cares? Just put money, and we are going to have less emissions.
I'm thinking Latin America has all these stories of huge hydroelectrics and huge projects that maybe were not the right project, no?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, especially in Latin America, is that, well, if you have infinite source of money, maybe who cares? But you always have an alternative use. Mm-hmm. And especially in Latin America, if you really are going to spend millions of dollars in producing green hydrogen with a technology that is very expensive today, and you see the same country that's investing that and have a very badly poor education system, you can balance that and say, okay, I cannot discuss that your decision is going to avoid more emissions than any other decision. But it's going to be so costly, and that money you can spend in another problem, in education, in, I don't know, in health. And especially in Latin America, you see many times those kind of decisions. So I put in that perspective. It's not that it's a bad decision in terms of environment, it's that it's not the best way to use the money, because it's too expensive today.
My name is Thomas O'Keefe. Do you know if this analysis has been used at all in terms of these proposed projects to link or interconnect the electrical grids of different countries in South America? I'm thinking particularly of the Chilean system with the Andean region, or between Chile and Argentina.
Yeah. Well, in practice, the answer is no. I mean, even within the country, we still cannot convince people that use investment with flexibility. As I mentioned, here in the US and in Chile, the same, the planner decide the capacity today and ask for the auction to build that capacity. So we are still in the way to convince them. They are not considering the flexibility in those interconnection, cross-border interconnection. Yeah. And the cross-border interconnection in Latin America in general has been a large problem. Not only because of that, but also because of the lack of trust. So it's not like, well, in Europe also there's some kind of lack of trust, but you have a system and you trust a little bit on your neighbor. In South America, countries in general don't trust on the neighbor, especially if your electricity system depend on the decisions of your neighbor. They are very afraid and have been very tough to convince people to go through the cross-border interconnections.
This might be the last question for you, Enzo. From Mauricio Davila in our YouTube, he's asking whether can flexibility be considered like a hedge against the bad outcomes, even if you are not always going to get the best possible outcome in the future. Is that a good way to think of this, that you're just hedging your bets?
Absolutely. I think that is an excellent analogy. I mean, when you buy a car, a new fancy car, the first thing you are doing is buying an insurance. And insurance costs you extra money. And why you pay that extra money? It's just because to be protected against the possible future. Mm-hmm. I like the analogy. This is kind of similar. You are paying an extra money today because you don't know what is going to happen in the future. Could be very positive, could be very negative. So you are protecting with this extra cost to make the changes that you need to adapt your technology, your investment to the scenario that's going to happen in the future. I like the analogy.
Well, thank you very much. So we've just been listening to Enzo Sauma, our Luxich Visiting Scholar here at the Center for Latin American Studies. Thank you very much, and please join us next week in our class seminar at the regular time. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.